If you played Outbound before version 1.0.14 and thought you knew the game inside out, I have to tell you something. You didn't. This update arrived quietly, without much fanfare, but it tweaked things that most people simply overlooked. So, today, I've selected 10 changes that made a real difference in the gameplay experience, which you probably didn't even realize happened. You might have felt something different while playing but couldn't explain why, and that is exactly what we are going to break down now. This change directly affects one of the things that most defines the pace of the early game: inventory limitations. Going from 12 to 20 units right at the start seems like a minor detail on paper, but in practice, it's a huge amount of freedom. Before, you had to constantly micromanage, choosing what to take and what to leave behind. Now, you can explore with much more peace of mind, without that constant feeling of throwing away opportunities. What I enjoyed most is how this smooths out the early game, without necessarily making it easier, just less restricted. You still need to think about what you're carrying, but you're no longer held hostage by frustrating decisions in the first few minutes. It makes the experience more fluid, especially for those who are just starting out or still figuring out the game's mechanics. And the fact that weight upgrades are now directly in the vehicle researcher is a massive evolution. Before, it felt like something distant, almost like a mid-game luxury. Not anymore. It's become a natural progression. You feel like you are upgrading your vehicle more organically, almost as if it were an extension of your progress in the world. Overall, this change shows that the devs are listening to community feedback and adjusting what actually impacts the experience. It's not just a numerical buff, it's a quality of life improvement that makes the game more enjoyable to play from the very beginning. And honestly, this type of adjustment is what makes us want to keep investing hours into the game. This change to the headlights in Outbound seems small at first glance, but in practice, it significantly changes how you relate to the environment. Before, the automatic system handled everything for you, which was functional but a bit soulless. Now, having manual control gives you the feeling that you are actually driving the van, making active decisions instead of just reacting to the game. What I found most interesting is the impact on immersion. Being able to turn off the headlights in the middle of the night creates much more tense and even strategic moments, depending on the situation. Whether to save energy, avoid drawing attention, or simply enjoy the ambiance in the dark, this adds a layer that didn't exist before. It's the kind of detail that turns a simple mechanic into something more expressive. There's also a quality of life aspect here. The automatic system didn't always turn them on at the ideal moment, which could be annoying, especially during light transitions or in specific areas. Now you have total control, which makes the experience more consistent and less dependent on the system's behavior. At the end of the day, it's another example of how small adjustments can greatly enrich the game. It's not a change that will appear in a trailer or grab attention right away, but while you're playing, it makes a difference all the time. And for me, this type of freedom, even in something as simple as a headlight, really helps build a stronger connection with the game. This fix for the disappearing biomass is one of those changes where only those who suffered through the problem understand its real weight. Before, any gaming session came with a hidden risk. You could do everything right: refuel the van's bioburner, organize your resources, and still lose everything when quitting the game. It was an unfair feeling, as if progress wasn't reliable. Now, this completely changes the relationship with the resource system. Knowing that the biomass will still be there when you return removes a huge weight from the experience. Outbound is a game that relies heavily on consistency, on small advances that accumulate, so when something like this fails, it ends up affecting the entire loop. The most interesting part is how this even alters player behavior. Previously, I avoided leaving too much accumulated in the bioburner if I knew I was going to end the session soon. It was almost a defensive instinct against the bug. With this fix, you can play more naturally without having to think twice about something that should be basic. This type of adjustment shows how technical details directly impact immersion. It's not a flashy novelty, it's not new content, but it's the type of improvement that makes the game work the right way. And when that happens, the experience flows much better. Before, the options were more limited, so many builds ended up looking the same. Now, you have much more freedom to give your space its own identity. The best part is how this speaks to the more creative side of the game. Outbound already has that building and customization vibe, and expanding the color palette allows each player to create something more unique. You can go from a more rustic, natural look to something more stylized, depending on your taste. This greatly increases the attachment factor to what you build. It's also a change that encourages more experimentation. When you have few options, you tend to go with the basics and stop there. With more colors available, you start testing combinations, playing with contrasts, and thinking more about the design of the space. And this, little by little, makes the game more engaging without needing to touch complex mechanics. It's a simple improvement, but it significantly strengthens the customization aspect, which is already one of the most relaxing parts of the game. It's the type of update that doesn't change the challenge, but greatly improves the experience for those who like to build and make everything their own. This addition of text and filters is one of those improvements you didn't know you needed until you used it. Outbound has a fair amount of item management, and as you progress, the amount of stuff accumulated starts to become chaotic. Before, finding a specific item in the middle of everything could turn into a mini side quest. Now, with the search bar, everything is much more direct. You type what you want, and that's it. No more scrolling through lists or trying to remember where you left every single thing. And the filters help even more, especially when you want to sort resources by type or use without wasting time organizing them manually. For me, this changes the game's pace significantly. Instead of breaking immersion to mess with your inventory, you resolve everything quickly and get back to what really matters: exploring, collecting, and upgrading your van. It seems simple, but it saves a massive amount of time throughout the playthrough. It's not something that grabs attention in a trailer, but in practice, it makes a difference, especially for those who have spent hours dealing with a messy inventory. The cut in the power cell cost changes the game more than it seems at first glance. Before, gathering 4 battery components for each unit created a constant feeling of lag, as if you were always one step behind where you wanted to be. Now, with just 2, the progression flows much more naturally without that excessive weight at the very beginning. This also changes how you view your own resources. Instead of treating every power cell as something rare that needs to be hoarded at all costs, you start to use them more freely. And that is important because it encourages a more active playstyle where you test, fail, and adjust rather than just hoarding while waiting for the perfect moment. Another thing that becomes evident is how the game gains momentum. When an essential resource requires too much effort, it ends up stalling everything around it. With this adjustment, you spend less time repeating tasks just to make progress, and more time actually exploring and evolving your possibilities within the game. In practice, the game stops holding you back artificially and starts matching your pace better, allowing for more consistent progression that is less dependent on grinding. What this change does, in practice, is eliminate that feeling of forced improvisation when decorating. Before, placing small objects on tables was almost a test of patience. You would adjust, rotate, try to align it by eye, and the result still wouldn't always look good due to somewhat strange collisions. With this new center slot, the game finally gives you precision without the effort. You pick the item, place it, and it simply respects the table space. No hacks, no strange surprises. It works the way it should have begun from the beginning. This changes the vibe inside the van quite a bit. When the system stops fighting you, decorating stops being a technical chore and becomes more creative. It makes you want to test combinations and make the environment feel more alive, because now you know the result will be clean and well placed. Ultimately, it's a silent change, but it greatly improves the sense of control. It may not directly affect gameplay, but it affects how you connect with your own space within the game, and that, in Outbound, carries much more weight than it seems. This was one of the most pleasant and useful changes in this update because it takes something simple and turns it into real convenience for your day-to-day. The dog already had that natural charisma of a travel companion, but now it also becomes a truly practical help. Seeing collected materials go straight into the vehicle's storage makes everything more fluid and makes the exploration routine feel less clunky. For me, the best part of this addition is that it reduces the constant back and forth that sometimes broke the rhythm. Instead of constantly interrupting what you were doing just to organize resources, the game lets this process happen more naturally. It seems like a minor detail, but in a game based on collection, management, and light survival, any well-thought-out automation greatly improves the experience. In co-op, this is even better. Everyone knows how common it is for someone to accidentally drop an item on the ground or simply leave materials behind in the heat of the moment. So seeing the dog picking that up and avoiding the mess almost makes it feel like the group gained an extra member just to keep the base running properly. It's the type of function that helps without demanding attention all the time, but it makes a difference throughout the whole game. What I like about this change is exactly that. It doesn't feel exaggerated or artificial. The dog continues to be part of the most welcoming identity of Outbound, just now with a much clearer utility within the gameplay loop. It's an improvement that saves time, reduces frustration, and still reinforces the game's charm in a very natural way. This change to the signal towers directly impacts the game's progression pace. Before, after clearing a biome, the feeling could become a bit lukewarm, as if the map took too long to give you new points of interest. Now, with the increase in signal frequency, the game practically rewards your exploration with more opportunities right away. What I find interesting here is that this creates a more addictive cycle. You finish interacting with all the towers in an area, and instead of feeling like that's it for now, the game pulls you back with more activities appearing. It gives you that sense of continuity, as if the world were reacting to your progress. In practice, this makes everything more dynamic. You spend less time waiting or wandering without a clear goal, and more time making decisions: which signal to follow, which resource to prioritize, where to go next. This type of adjustment keeps the player engaged without needing to force anything artificially. To me, it's a change that greatly improves the general flow of the experience. It's not about difficulty or new content, it's about timing. And when the game gets that right, everything becomes more engaging and rewarding to play. This change to the ladders is a classic case of something small that caused disproportionate frustration. Anyone who has ever gotten stuck trying to climb a ladder in Outbound, especially in the windmill, knows how that completely killed the momentum. It wasn't hard, it wasn't challenging, it was just clunky. Now, with this mechanic reworked, movement has become much more reliable. You simply go up, go down, and continue the game without having to fight the controls or the physics. It might seem basic, but when a system like this works well, it disappears, and that is exactly what should happen. For me, this greatly improves the fluidity of vertical exploration, especially in more important structures. The windmill, for example, is no longer a point of technical tension and returns to being just another natural part of the world to explore. It's the type of place that should be interesting, not irritating. This change shows care and polishing the moment-to-moment experience. It doesn't add anything new in terms of content, but it removes a pebble in the road that was causing more trouble than it should have. And sometimes, improving a game is exactly that, taking away what was silently bothering you the whole time.